So it's very important to understand that whether or not the activities we do are Dharma activities depends entirely on the motivation. Therefore, we stress that it is very important that our motivation or our activities are influenced by bodhicitta. That would be the best. But even if we were not able to generate bodhicitta, influenced by bodhicitta, at the very least, we should be influenced by the mind of renunciation. Failing to do that, if we engage in an activity without any bodhicitta, without any renunciation, the activity does not become dharma. It becomes a worldly activity. And every worldly activity is just a cause that perpetuates samsara. It does not become the cause for obtaining liberation. It does not become the cause for obtaining the state of omniscience. So it is very important to understand those things and act accordingly. So since this is the case, Geshe says, my plan is that I want to talk about renunciation and bodhicitta, just gradually introduce them in a way that is easy to assimilate. So anyway, currently we're dealing with the colors, still doing the colors, not so easy, but maybe easy. But we will talk about renunciation and bodhicitta. So in our last class, we talked a bit about calculating the 3 possibilities and 4 possibilities and how we go about doing this. Today, we will continue with this. And also, we still have some, let's say, debates or questions about the colors. So that's how we do the class today. Okay, so let's start with this question. So we want to see what is the difference between that which is not a root color and it is a secondary color. So what's the difference between these two? Okay. So Geshe was saying, quickly looking at it, I think that here we're going to say there are 3 possibilities. And when we're looking at pervasion, not pervasion, obviously we're going to say if something is a secondary color, it is necessary, it is pervasive, that it is not a root color. Okay, I think that's straightforward. Okay, give me here the possibility of something which is both. So, if you look at all the secondary colors, right, we have hundreds of secondary colors. They are secondary colors and they are not root color, isn't it? They all fall in this category. Okay, so Geshe was saying here that we're talking about all the secondary colors fulfilling that. So we have pervasion there. And then obviously we can come up with something which is neither. Okay, this is, so in this way, let's say we calculate the possibilities as being 3 possibilities. And Geshe was saying there's actually other ways of calculating it in a different way. Okay, so let's say that when we ask the question, what is the difference between not being a root color and being a secondary color? And you give the answer, we have 3 possibilities. When you say we have 3 possibilities, Geshe says, I expect you, in order to give me the examples. So first of all, give me the example of that which is both. Okay. So when we say we have 3 possibilities, we begin by saying, okay, we have to give a possibility, an example of something which is both. So you say, take the color of a black cloth. It follows it is not a root color because it is not suitable to indicate the hue of a root color. And therefore, it follows that if it is not suitable to indicate the hue of the root color, it is not a root color. So by giving this all this information, you have totally covered one of the areas. Okay, so we have covered one area that was about not being the root color, but now we have to look at the second one to establish or to explain why we say that it is secondary. And as we do this, we are not allowed to change the example. So the example that we have to keep running with is the color of the black cloth. So take the color of the black cloth. It follows it is secondary color, and we say, yes, I accept, because it is a hue suitable to indicate secondary color. And if it is a hue suitable to indicate color, it follows that it is a secondary color. It's pervasive that it's a secondary color. And to this, you have to say, yes, I agree. Okay, so in this way, we covered this area with all the reasoning and the correct responses. Okay, so having covered the first possibility, now we have to look at the second possibility. And in the second possibility, really, we have to look at the pervasion. Okay, so it is pervasive that if it is A, it is B, and perhaps, because we're talking about three possibilities here, if it is B, it's not pervasive that it is A. Okay, so with the pervasion in one direction, necessarily, if it is this, it necessarily has to be that. But if it is that, it is not necessarily that it is this. And when you come to say there is no pervasion or it is not necessary, then you have to give the example. Okay, so we say that if something is a secondary color, it is pervasive, it is necessary that it is not a root color. Okay, but if something is not a root color, it is not necessary, it is not pervasive that it has to be a secondary color. And when you say this, you have to give an example, and then you say, for example, a vase, a pillar. It's not a root color, but also it's not a secondary color. So as you can see here with the second possibility where we had to look at the pervasion and we say if it is this, it has to be that, but if it is that, it doesn't have to be this. Again, we gave the complete presentation and we gave the reason why and we gave the examples. Okay, so now we come to the last, which is we have to give up the possibility of something which is neither. And when we have to give the example of the possibility of something which is neither, we have to investigate each one of them. Again, fully follow the full logical steps, and then we will have the complete presentation. So as you can see here, we have gone through the detailed presentation where every step is supported by reasoning. But once the two debaters have a little bit of familiarity with this subject, they do not need to stay all of this. So the debate goes much faster because they both understand the in-between steps, right? So someone asked the question, okay, what is the difference between that which is not a root color, but it's a secondary color? So first of all, they will say, okay, possibility of that which is both, and they would just state the example. They don't need to state all the other reasoning that we just did. And then having given that, they will move into the second possibility and say, okay, who pervades whom, right? And immediately they will give the example of the non-pervasion. And then finally, they will just say, okay, and something which is both is this. So it will go much faster. So this is what we mean. There are two ways of having this debate or this discussion. Okay, so what do you think? What is best for us, for our class? Should we do the long version or shall we do the short version, which is faster? So Geshe was saying, in our class, we will have some people who would go in the short and fast method, and we have some other people that need to go through, the full version. Both of them are very good because both are calculating the possibilities, isn't it? So very good for both. All right. Okay. So let's look at something else. Another example. We want to see the difference or calculate the possibilities between that which is all colors and that which is a color. Okay. So before you give any answer, first of all, you have to understand these two objects that you are comparing. So what is it that which is all colors? Okay, that which is all colors is actually an object of knowledge. Okay, so it's an object. All colors is an object of knowledge. So basically, you're comparing object of knowledge with that which is one color. And Geshe was saying, I will tell you it is 4 possibilities. So start thinking.
Yes.
So having said that we have 4 possibilities, we have to start from the beginning and give a possibility, an example of something which is both. But to be able to calculate those things, you have to be very clear what are the 2 things that you are comparing. One of the things that you are comparing is that which is all colors. And the second object is that which is a color. Okay, so be clear about these 2 and try to find something which is both. Yep. So when we try to find something which is both, it has to be something which is a color. So definitely we have to work with a specific example, a specific basis there to say this is a color, but also it has to fulfill the other part of something which is all colors. Okay, so we have to have one thing that is all colors and something which, and it is a color. So it has to be both, looking for the possibility. Okay, so we talk about, first of all, we have to find an example to understand one thing that is all colors. All right, so you could say that it is object of knowledge, or give you another word to work with, existent, right? All colors are existent, aren't they? Okay, all the colors that exist in this world, isn't it? They are existent. Okay, so existent, if you use existent or phenomenon meaning existent phenomenon, means all the colors are represented here. They fall in this category. But that's not enough, because then existent must be a color. And here we have a problem. Okay, so Geshe was saying for a possibility of something which is both, let's say that you choose to give the answer colors, isn't it? It would fulfill the first one, all colors, a color.
Colors.
So that example that we give here is all colors are that thing, and the color is that thing as well. Now remember, when we introduced colors, we gave the definition of the color, and we say that which is a hue suitable to indicate a color, isn't it? So instead of saying color as the example of that which is both, you could use the definition of the color and say that's that which is suitable to indicate a hue, because all colors are suitable to indicate a hue, and that which is suitable to indicate a hue is a color. Okay, so Geshe, in this example I gave you, I use for the possibility of that which is both, I said you can use color, or you can say the definition of color that's suitable to indicate hue. All right, can you think of something else? Can you come up with another example? Yeah, no, secondary color is not correct, because all colors are not secondary colors. Yeah, because in the group all colors, we have root colors as well, right? So your example cannot be secondary colors because that does not include root colors. So Geshe has already given you this first example of something which is both, and we say color, or then you can substitute color with a definition, a suitable hue, right? So Geshe says you must start thinking now, like, what else can I use here? What else? Is there something else I can use here? So Geshe was saying, if you are having, initially we said color, right? And then if you're having difficulty finding another example, another possibility, a safest option is to give the definition of color, because the definition of color and color are the same. Okay, so now at this point, your opponent can say, what's the matter? Are you stuck? Do you only have these two? Can you just give me these two examples? And if you try and you cannot find, then you can say, yes, that's all I can do. Because if you try to throw other examples, other possibilities in there, your opponent will find an opportunity to create difficulty for you. Okay. And then perhaps, like you said, I cannot find another example, right? So, but maybe your opponent can come with an example and say, oh, what about this and this subject, you know? Then you have to listen carefully, see if there is a mistake in the example that they're giving you. Okay, so we said we try to find the example of that which is all colors and it is a color. And then we say color. And Geshe was saying from there, you could say it follows that if it is a color, it is pervasive, it is necessary, that is a suitable hue. Okay, so suppose that you are the one who has to give the answers, and Geshe is the one who is asking the questions in the debate, right? And if the ball is on your court, and you think, at the end you say, okay, yeah, it is pervasive. I agree. There is pervasion. Okay, so that means that now the ball is on Geshe-la's court, because now Geshe-la has to think very hard to come up with an example of something which is not pervasive. Okay, so now the difficulty is with Geshe-la. Okay, maybe he comes up with something, maybe not. If he doesn't, then you are equal. All right. Okay, so you're going to say, yes, it is pervasive, or you're going to keep searching. If you cannot come up with an example, a possibility, then you just have to say, yes, it's pervasive. You don't have another answer.
Only two have. Okay. Done. Now done.
So, all right. So we had the example of color and suitable to be a hue. What about if you say either secondary color or root color? So all colors definitely will be either root color or secondary color, isn't it? And that which is either root color or secondary color will be a color. Wrong. All colors will have to be either a root color or a secondary color, isn't it? And if something is either a root color or a secondary color, that thing will have to be a color, isn't it? So either root or secondary color is an example, a possibility of that which is both. So Geshe was saying there are some who say, no, it's not. But if you just look at this example that we give, either root or secondary color. Okay, this is the one object you have, either root or secondary color. Okay, so all colors will have to be that. And if it is that, it will have to be a color.
So if it's either root or secondary color, then it's one of it's either root or if it's secondary. So they do not it's only one of these two. So if it's only one of these two, it's either one of these two, it's not all colors.
Yeah, but all colors. Okay. The tsawa kato ta yelanki kato kanrung yiba yina yamana tsawa kato re yamana yelanki kato re kato tamje mares. We're not saying. Yeah, we are saying that all colors are it. All colors will be either root color or secondary color, isn't it?
Because it's giving definition, not object already. Now become definition game, no?
I will not answer because it's a word of play of words.
Yes, I said no, because today when we say either root or secondary color, actually we have existing examples, right? Something will be either a root color or a secondary example. So there is meaning in this debate. Yesterday, or a couple of classes ago, it was this either black or white. That was a play of words, but not here. Okay, so what happens here is like initially you say there is pervasion, but then you start thinking about it logically, and you found an example where there is no pervasion. So now you actually have to change your position, and you have to say, oh, you know what? I found an example, I found a possibility, so it's no pervasion. Okay, so initially your position, your assertion was that there is pervasion. And then you come up with an example, a possibility that shows there is no pervasion. It means you have to lose your initial assertion. So, Tsar, you finished. So this is how it is, the debate in the monastery. So first of all, someone, there are two people debating, and one says it is pervasive, it necessarily is the case. But then we come up with the example of something that shows that it's not pervasive, it's not necessarily the case. So they have to let go of their initial position. They have to admit that, oh, I was wrong. So this is what the opponent says, Tsar, meaning you lost, and the actual meaning is you should be embarrassed because first you said it is, now you're saying it's not. Okay, so give me something which is all colors, but it is not a color. Geshe says, I've already given you this, the very, very beginning. We said that all colors are existent, but existent is not a color. So existent is your answer here. Okay, so give me something which is color, but it is not all colors.
Black color, yeah. Many have there. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is the way that we can calculate the 3 and the 4 possibilities. Okay, so now you can actually work in a different way with the root colors, the secondary colors. You can go with the white, the yellow, the blue, the red, and so forth. Okay, so if we start with white, and then if you say not white, so what is this not white? Where are we going to classify it? It's not going to be color. Actually, we need to talk about permanent. So Geshe says, I would like to talk to you about permanent entities, permanent phenomena. Okay, so all of those things, not a root color, not secondary color, not white, not blue, not black, not yellow, not green. What are all those things? All of those things are permanent. Okay, so we said, if you say it is not white, it is not root color, it is not secondary color, and so forth, all of this is permanent. Now, white does not exist. Red does not exist. Root color does not exist. Secondary color does not exist. So what is it? Permanent. Okay, now there's an interesting point here. We say that not white is permanent. However, if something is not white, there is no provision. It is not necessary that it is permanent. Keep this in mind. For example, vase does not exist, or lack of the vase. This is permanent. But if something is a not existing vase, that doesn't mean that it is permanent. There's no provision. Okay, so we say the lack of vase, not existing vase, is permanent. Because it is permanent, it exists. So one can say, okay, where does this not existing vase exist? You can say, in your pocket. There is not a vase in there, isn't it? So Geshe says, in my pocket, I do not have a vase. In your pockets, you don't have any vase, isn't it? So not having a vase, or the non-existence of the vase, is something that exists. All right. And what it is, it's permanent. So all those things, not white, not root, not black, it's all of those things are permanent. Not having white, or the non-existence of white, not existent white, not existent black, not existent root color. Okay, so not white is permanent, but if it is not white, it doesn't mean that it is permanent. For example, the vase, the pillar, and so forth. Okay, otherwise it'd be hard to explain permanent.
I'd like to ask, why is not white permanent? I don't understand, don't get it. Why permanent?
Okay, we say that something is permanent if it has a common locus or a common basis with permanent. So, for example, if I talk to you about uncompounded space here is something which is not white, and it is also permanent. So it has this common locus with permanent. It got worse. It got more difficult. Okay, so when we talk about permanent, right, and you try to think an example of something permanent, permanent must be, because you're trying to find an example, right? So it must be something that is existent, it exists, and at the same time, it is something that doesn't change momentarily, right? That's what it is, permanent. It should not change, but it should exist. So once you start thinking, trying to find an example, it's not easy to find an example. So we say here that the lack of the vase, or not being a vase, not vase, these are examples of permanent. So for example, the lack of the vase is something that we found. Geshe says, I found it in my pocket, we found it in your pockets. So it is existent. So another way that, how do we usually understand permanent, right? Is something that doesn't change at all, right? When you say permanent, you want to see it fixed, eternal, not changing momentarily. It's almost like a big block of metal that nothing happens to it. It's quite hard to find an example. So Geshe was saying, even if you give an example of something that seems to be very stable to you, such as, for example, a big piece of metal, very hard, very stable, but this is not really permanent because, for example, you could melt it, you could cut it, and so on and so forth. So it is not permanent. So once you start trying to actually look for something permanent, you really want to understand the motion or what is permanent, isn't it? Not just say permanent, but to really understand the meaning of permanent. It is hard. Okay, if we think in a different way, okay, we have given these examples: lack of vase, lack of white, lack of black. Okay, so this idea, lack of white, all right. So this, because it's a generality, is permanent. Similarly, if I say existent, or if I say object of knowledge, as a generality, these things are permanent. But if you look at the specifics, if something is an object of knowledge, there is no provision that it is permanent. Okay? If something is not white color, there is no provision that it is permanent. So if you approach it in this way, if you think generality equals permanent, then that's easier to understand. Okay, another way of thinking about it is start by thinking about impermanent. How do we describe, how do we understand impermanent? Impermanent is something that changes moment by moment. This is impermanent. Now look at its opposite, the complete opposite. The complete opposite would have to be permanent, and permanent has to be something which is not changing moment by moment. Okay, the impermanent exists, we know that. And then its opposite, which is the permanent, also exists. So now we're having this discussion, and in a sense it's all theoretical. Like, you can say, oh, okay, I will take the opposite of impermanent. I will have something that is not changing momentarily, and this will be the permanent. Okay, but if someone says, okay, if this is how you understand permanent, give me an example of something which is permanent. It's not enough to say, oh, something that does not change moment by moment. So this, if you can come up with an example, will actually indicate if you really got it. We all understand that if you have a vase somewhere, this vase is impermanent and it deteriorates, it changes momentarily, isn't it? But now you have to come with an example of the opposite. So if you say that example that Geshe mentioned, the lack of vase in my pocket, this is something that exists, right? But at the same time, it's not something that disintegrates or changes moment by moment. All right, let's start. Do you have any vase in your pocket? Anybody with a vase in your pocket? Okay. So there's no vase in your pocket, right? That exists. The lack of vase in your pocket exists, isn't it? We understand the existence of the absence of vase in our pocket. So the absence of vase is something that we all understand. And this absence of vase is something that we can state as an example and can help us understand permanent. Otherwise, if you just keep saying, oh, it's the opposite of not changing momentarily, you don't have a concrete example. And Geshe was saying, it's like you're floating in the air, you're all over the place, but you need to have an example to make it all settle down, isn't it? Okay, so these are things that we understand. Okay, you can have momentary disintegration, but it's important to talk about a concrete example of the opposite of that.
Mac, please. Oh, yeah.
Geshe, sorry. If everything is impermanent, everything disintegrates, isn't it the disintegration, the impermanence part is actually permanent?
No. Okay, there is difference between those two things. We talk about momentary disintegration. So we're looking at disintegration itself, destruction itself. we do not call it permanent because it is something, when you hear disintegrates or destroyed, it means something is exhausted. What is causing this? It is caused by causes and conditions. So because disintegration or destruction is caused by causes and conditions, we do not call it permanent. However, the absence of the vase from our pocket is not something that is caused by causes and conditions. And therefore, they're different, these two things, disintegration and absence. However, the way that you're thinking is not wrong, because Geshe was saying we can think about those things in two ways. You brought up the example of disintegration, and Geshe says I can also mention negation or stopping, right? Negation is like you stopping something, yeah? So negation or stopping something, if you think about it as a generality, then you have to say it is permanent. But if you think about it in another way, like what is causing something to stop, right? And then if you say, oh, there are causes and conditions, so then you have to classify it as impermanent. So Geshe says, I cannot, you have to think very carefully with those things, how you respond. Okay, so let's go back to the initial statement. We say that not white, not black, not yellow, all of those things, we say they are permanent, right? But then we say, if it is not white, it doesn't have to be permanent. All right, okay, so if we say not white, we have to say this is permanent, right? Okay, so in this way, you could say, since it is not white, then we have no color, because we say that not white means it's permanent. And if it's permanent, there are no colors in permanent. However, if you say, since it is not white, you could give another answer. Since it is not white, it is black, it is yellow, it is green. You could give all of those answers, which is completely different direction, isn't it? So we must think about that. So actually, this is quite difficult in debate, but remember that collected topics are here to just make us think, continue thinking, analyzing. So one way you could say, since it is not white, it means there is no color. It means because it is permanent. It means there is no cause. It has no cause, and so forth. It's not very easy. It's difficult. Okay. So we have talked about the colors, the blue, the yellow, the white, the reds, and all the other colors. We also talked about different shapes. And we say that in terms of visible objects, our eyes can only see colors and shapes, isn't it? Okay, and then we talk about a white horse. Okay, so because it is a horse, the horse is an individual. Okay, so almost like in Tibetan often, or in English often we translate it as a person. I know you're going to say it's an animal, but it means an individual person. Okay, so if something is an individual person, it cannot be color or shape, but we can see it. And then that makes us question, oh, well, then the horse perhaps is not an individual, not a person. Okay, so when we talk about the person belongs in a different category, the category of non-associated compositional factors. And if you are in that category, as it says, non-associated, it's not associated with the form. It's a completely different category. So it doesn't have color, it doesn't have shape. Okay, so here we have the white horse, and since it is a horse, it has to be classified as a person, which means it's a non-associated compositional factor. So it's almost hard to, when we have the danger of saying the white horse is not white, right? Because it's a person. Okay, so if we follow this, if we say we end up saying the white horse is not white, or the white horse is not a horse, like we have to make a choice. So we are working with a white horse. We say if you say that the white horse is not horse, then you have to say the white horse is color. I'm going to classify it as color. Okay. So with these cases, when you talk about the white horse, you have to make a choice. Either you will say the white horse is white, in which case you will say it's not a person, or you would say the white horse is not white and it is a person. Okay. There are some who express it in a different way. And they say the white horse is not white, but the color of the white horse is white. The white horse itself is a person. Okay, so in our case, important to understand that we have to make a choice. Either we would say that the white horse is person, or we will say that it is a color. We cannot say that it is both person and color, because person and color are opposites. Okay, so when you're dealing with the white horse, you have to make a choice. There are only two ways you could go about it. Either you would say the white horse is white. If you say it's white, it means it is not a person. Or you would say the white horse is not white. The white horse is a person. Only these two options. Okay, so actually we have to make a decision here, which way you want to go. Do you want to say that the white horse is not white? Do you want to say the white horse is not a person? Would you rather go with the option that says the color of the white horse is white, but the white horse itself is person? Because keep in mind that your opponent will be listening very carefully, and they're going to see what logic you use. And if you say, for example, the white horse is not horse, they will follow up with and apply similar logic. So then this will become an argument of similar logic. So Geshe was saying, when you debate, you just have to be aware of the different types of logic, because we have that thing of applying similar logic in the response. So from your side, being aware of this, you have to make certain choices and think how you want to respond or lead this debate. But first of all, in your mind, you must, compare these categories, and you say, I have the person, I have the shape, I have the color. Now, I know that shape and color and person are two things that are contradictory. There is no common basis with that. And then you decide how you want to run the debate. Maybe you want to follow what is usually expressed in the world, the common language, if you want, but you have to be aware of the pitfalls of that. Actually, this conversation comes down to it is not. And it is not, in debate translate as it is pervasive that it is, meaning it is necessarily that it is, or it is not pervasive, meaning it is not necessarily that it is. And therefore, we have to say that if something is a person, it is pervasive, it is necessary that it is not a color. And if something is a color, it is pervasive, it is necessary that it is not a person, because person and color are opposites. Okay, so it comes down to that. Okay, now when we begin the debate, you see that actually there are different types of responses that you can give. One type of response is I accept, or this is my position. It means yes. All right, plain English. The second one is why. That's another response. Another one is reason not established. And the last one is there is no provision. Okay. You will get into trouble if you cannot differentiate between, the meaning between these responses. So Geshe would like to explain this. So since we have discussed the colors and understand a bit, Geshe says I will use, this colored conversation to demonstrate these answers. Right. So let's look at this sentence. Take the white color. It follows it is color. The answer that we give to that is I accept. Yes. And if you say I accept, it means my position is that white is a color. Okay. So in this sentence, basically you can identify two parts. The first part of the sentence says, take the subject, the white color. Okay, so white color is the subject. We have a subject. And the second part of the sentence says, it follows, it is color. So it is color is a position. Okay, so unless the first part, A, the subject matter, what we are discussing, take the subject, which in this case is the white color, unless A is B is a color, you would not say, I accept. Otherwise, you find yourself in trouble. So every time your opponent will be saying, take this and this subject, it follows, it is such and such. You cannot say, I accept in every case, unless indeed the subject we are discussing is that thing, is the position that is described. All right, so listen to this. Take yellow, take the color yellow. It follows, it is color. What would you say? It is color, isn't it? So you should say, yes, I accept. So now if someone says, take the white color, it follows, it is black color. What would you say? So in this example where we say, take the white color, it follows that it is black color. Okay, we know that the answer we want to give is like, no, it is not. However, we don't give this answer. The answer that we give is the second answer, which is why. Like, give me the reason that makes you say that if something is white color, it means that it has to be black color. So really, we are saying, I don't agree with this. But we don't say, I don't agree. We just say, okay, please explain to me the reason. Why? Why are you saying this? So this answer, why, it can be the proper answer when you hear it follows, it is, right? Depending on what they say. So for example, they could be say, take the white color, it follows, it is not color. And then you say, why? Why are you saying that white is not a color? All right. Or you could say, take the white color, it follow, it is black. Again, you say, why? Why is white black? Okay. So when we have it follows, it could be it follows it is, or it could be it follows it is not. In either of those cases, depending on your understanding, you could say why. Let's look at the more complex phrase here. Take color, it follow, it is white because it is black. All right, so you see here we have three parts. Take color, it follows it white because it is black. So we're using the reason because it is black to support the fact that it is white. We say it is white because it is black, right? However, there is no provision here. if it is black, it is not pervasive that it is white. And therefore, the answer we give here is no pervasion. Okay, so if you say no pervasion, now you actually have to come up with an example, isn't it, of something which is not like the exemption. Okay, actually, here we can give a different response. Instead of just saying there is no pervasion, we can say your pervasion, the opposite is pervasive. Opposite pervasion. Okay, because what we say here is, we say take the color, it is white because it is black. Not only there is no pervasion that if it is black, not only is there pervasion that if it is black, it is not white, actually there is pervasion of the opposite. If it is black, it is not white. So this is what we say, opposite pervasion, meaning the pervasion you're giving is completely wrong. It's completely the opposite. Okay, if the debate comes about an object that, for example, is, you couldn't say if it exists or it does not exist. Okay, right there in front of you, a concrete example. It would be like you would be in trouble if you say it exists. You would be in trouble if you say it didn't exist. Then in this case, it is permissible to say, I am in doubt. Now, let's say someone says, take color because it is red. What do we answer here? We say reason is not established. Basically, we say, no, it's not. So here, when we say reason established, or actually you don't hear the opposite, you would not hear reason established. Usually they say reason is not established. To use this, it means that the reasoning must really be applicable and it must actually prove that. Okay, so it's important to understand when we say there is no pervasion, or when we say reason not established. All right, are you more confused? Are you understanding some bit more? Okay, so today was the last class on the colors. And from next class, we will start with another chapter, which is called Established Bases. So the first chapter, which was on the colors, obviously these are things that we can perceive with our eyes. And together with that, we talked about the vases and other objects like this, because basically we're talking about shapes. So shapes and colors are things that we can directly perceive, and therefore it is easy to debate. So you say, take this color, it follows it is this, it follows it is that. So you can see how you can say there is pervasion, no pervasion, I accept, or why do you say this, or reason not established. So it's relatively easy to carry out the debate with things that we can directly perceive. From now on, we will begin dealing with more difficult subjects, the established bases, not necessarily things that you can perceive with your eyes. So the debate will become a little bit more difficult, but please don't be disappointed. We just have to persevere. Okay, so the thing is, as we say, that the shapes and the colors and the forms and so forth are things that are perceived by sense awareness. And therefore, in a sense, you could say there are objects that are gross objects, obvious, and that's the reason why we begin doing this debate, analysis, investigation. Our training begins with these objects that are obvious to our eyes, and because it makes it easy to engage these objects and make up our mind. Once we understand, because this is our initial training, once we understand how things go, then we can transfer that technique to other objects that are more difficult. So don't think it is getting worse. Actually, it is getting easier. because now we have the technique and we're just going to transfer this to other subjects, objects, subjects, whatever. All right. Thank you very much. And we stop here for tonight.